Some stories stay with you long after they're told. This one came to me while thinking about the folks we pass by without a second glance, the ones judged by how they look, rather than who they are. In the small towns of the Old West, worth was often measured by what people could see. But every now and then, someone looked past the surface. This is the story of Clara, a young woman the world had written off, and Elias, a mountain man who saw what nobody else bothered to notice. It's a tale of second chances and quiet courage. I hope it warms your heart the way a good cup of coffee warms you on a cold morning. Dust filled Clara's mouth. Her knees hit the packed earth of the market square before she understood what happened, her mother's palm still burning against her cheek, the cracked egg forgotten somewhere behind them. Voices stopped. Wagon wheels went silent. Even the livestock seemed to hold their breath. She pressed her palms flat against the dirt. 19 years old and kneeling in front of the whole town. Again. A shadow fell across her hands. Clara looked up. A man stood there, tall as a lodgepole pine, shoulders broad enough to block the October sun, gray threaded through his beard. His buckskin coat smelled of wood smoke and pine pitch. He wasn't looking at her mother. He was looking at her, his hand extended downward, rough palm, scarred knuckles, waiting. No one had offered Clara a hand since her father's funeral, 7 years ago. If you're joining us from somewhere quiet today, a favorite chair, a place that feels like home, we're glad you're here. From the data we've received, 60% of our viewers haven't subscribed yet. We hope you'll subscribe and support us to create even more quality content. Thank you kindly. Clara's fingers hovered an inch from his palm. The calluses looked like tree bark. A scar ran from his thumb to his wrist, old, white, healed wrong. This was a hand that had hauled timber, skinned elk, survived things she couldn't name. She took it. His grip was firm but not crushing. He pulled her up in one smooth motion. And for a moment Clara stood close enough to smell the pine pitch on his collar, the faint copper of old blood from whatever he'd been skinning that morning. Her mother's voice cut through the silence. "What do you think you're—" The man turned. Not fast, not slow. The way a boulder shifts when it decides to move. He reached inside his buckskin coat. Clara's breath stopped. But what he pulled out wasn't a weapon. A leather pouch, drawstring loose, heavy enough to make his wrist flex. He set it on the nearest barrel. The mouth fell open. Gold coins caught the October light. More gold than Clara had seen in her entire life. More than her mother had probably touched in a decade. "For her debt to you," he said. "Whatever you reckon she owes, room, board, all of it, settled. Not a question, not a request." His voice flat as river stones. Her mother's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: outrage, calculation, hunger. Her hand twitched toward the pouch, pulled back, twitched again. "She's my daughter." The words came out strangled. "You can't just... She's a woman grown 19, I figure. Old enough to choose." Behind them, Mrs. Harmon from the general store whispered something to old Mr. Peterson. A few men shifted their weight, glanced at each other. But no one stepped forward. No one challenged the stranger who stood a head taller than any man in the square, shoulders wide enough to fill a doorway. Her mother's hand closed around the pouch. The man turned back to Clara. His eyes weren't kind. Exactly. But they weren't cruel either. They were steady. patient, waiting. "Can you walk far?" Clara's throat closed. Her legs ached from hauling flour sacks since before dawn. Her cheek still throbbed where her mother's palm had landed. 20 feet away, the stray hound she'd fed yesterday watched from under a wagon. She had nothing. No money, no plan, no idea where this man wanted to take her. Her mother was already walking away. Gold clutched to her chest, not looking back. Clara opened her mouth to answer. "Yes." The word came out rougher than Clara expected. Her throat was dry. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The man nodded once. "Wait here." He walked toward a pack mule tied to the hitching post, a gray beast with a white blaze down its nose and the name Moses branded into its halter. Clara watched him check the panniers, adjust a rope, speak something low to the animal. The mule flicked its ears, but didn't move. Around her, the market square hummed back to life. People turned away. Conversations resumed. The show was over. Clara stood in the same spot where she'd fallen, dust still on her knees. And no one looked at her now. She was already gone to them. "Girl," she turned. The man she still didn't know his name stood 10 feet away. "You got anything to fetch clothes belongings?" Clara thought of the converted pantry she slept in, the corn husk mattress, the dress with the patched elbows hanging on its nail. None of it mattered. None of it was hers, really. Except one thing. "A tin box," she said. "Small. Under my bed." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Get it. I'll wait." Clara walked through the square, past Mrs. Harmon, who suddenly found her shoes fascinating, past old Mr. Peterson, who coughed and looked away, past the spot where her mother had stood counting gold coins 30 seconds ago. The house was empty when she got there. Of course it was. Her mother was probably already at the dry goods store, spending. Clara moved through the kitchen without looking at it. Into her room, the pantry. Really? Still smelling of onions and old potatoes. She dropped to her knees, reached under the mattress. The tin box was where she'd left it. "Dr. Price's baking powder," the label said, faded to near nothing. She opened it. The pressed columbine flower, the bone button from her father's shirt, everything she owned that mattered. She closed it, pressed it to her chest, stood at the door. She paused, looked back at the tiny space she'd slept in for 7 years. The stained walls, the single nail for hanging clothes, the crack in the ceiling she'd stared at every night, counting the seconds until morning. She walked out without closing the door. The man was exactly where she'd left him, holding Moses's lead rope. He glanced at the tin box but said nothing, just turned and started walking. Clara followed. They left the town by the north road, past the livery stable, past the church with its whitewashed steeple, past the last house, where the widow Patterson was hanging laundry, and stopped to stare. Clara kept her eyes forward, one foot in front of the other. The road turned to packed dirt, then to a trail, then to something barely wider than a deer path. Pines closed in around them. The air changed cooler, sharper, smelling of sap and wet earth. Clara's feet ached inside her worn brogans. The soles were thin enough that she felt every stone. She didn't complain. She hadn't complained about anything in 7 years. The trail climbed steadily. Clara's calves burned. Her breath came harder. Sweat soaked through the back of her dress, despite the October chill. Years of hauling flour sacks had built muscles she didn't know she had. But mountain trails were different, steeper, endless. The man walked ahead, leading Moses, his stride steady and unhurried. He never looked back to check if she was keeping up. He just walked, like he trusted her to follow, like it never occurred to him that she might quit. So she didn't. The trail crossed a creek shallow, clear, running fast over smooth stones. The man stopped, pulled a canteen from Moses's pack, held it out to her. Clara took it. Drank. The water was cold enough to make her teeth ache. "Name's Elias." She lowered the canteen, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Clara?" He nodded. Took the canteen back, capped it, stood there for a moment, looking at her the way someone might look at a horse they were considering buying. Not unkind, just assessing. "You'll work," he said. "Ain't easy living up there. Cooking, gardening, whatever needs doing." He paused, adjusted the strap on Moses's harness. "But I don't hold with cruelty. No one's going to raise a hand to you, ever. You understand?" Clara's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. Couldn't have spoken if her life depended on it. So she nodded. Elias nodded back, picked up Moses's lead rope, started walking again. Clara followed. The afternoon wore on. The trail steepened. Trees grew thicker, blocking the sun until they walked through permanent twilight. Clara's legs shook with every step now. Her brogans had rubbed raw spots on both heels. The tin box dug into her ribs where she clutched it against her chest. But something else was happening too. Something she couldn't name. With every step away from town, her shoulders loosened by a fraction, her spine straightened by a degree. The knot between her shoulder blades, the one she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there, began to ease. She didn't notice. But walking behind her, Elias did. The sun dropped toward the western ridges. Orange light spilled through gaps in the pines, turning the trail to gold. Birds she didn't recognize called from somewhere high above. Clara's foot caught a root. She stumbled, caught herself, kept walking. Elias stopped. She nearly ran into Moses's hindquarters before she realized Elias was pointing at something ahead, a ridge, black and jagged against the dying light. It looked impossibly far away. It looked like the edge of the world. "Past that?" he said. Day and a half more. Clara stared at the ridge. Her legs trembled. Her heels were bleeding inside her shoes. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to stop, to sit down, to admit she couldn't do this. She set her jaw. She kept walking. The cabin emerged from the pines like something that had grown there. Clara stopped walking. Her legs had gone numb 3 hours ago, and now they simply refused to move. She stared at the structure ahead, sturdy logs notched tight at the corners, a riverstone chimney rising against the gray sky, a covered porch with a rocking chair that faced the valley below. Elias walked on without looking back. Moses's hooves crunched on the pine needles. The sound faded as they moved toward the cabin. And still Clara stood there, her worn brogans rooted to the trail. It was real. After a day and a half of walking, of sleeping on the cold ground wrapped in a horse blanket, of eating dried venison and hardtack that Elias handed her, without comment, it was real. A vegetable garden sprawled beside the cabin, gone wild with autumn neglect. Squash vines tangled through what might have been bean poles. Something that looked like turnip greens had bolted and gone to seed. Beyond the garden, a creek ran silver over smooth stones, the sound of it reaching Clara's ears, like music. Elias tied Moses to a post near a small corral. He climbed the porch steps, and Clara noticed now that he favored his right leg, a slight hitch in his stride that she hadn't seen on flat ground. Old injury, the kind that stiffened up after a long walk. He reached for a key hanging on a nail beside the door frame, unlocked the heavy plank door, and disappeared inside. Clara made her feet move. One step. Another. The porch boards creaked under her weight. Through the open door, she heard the scratch of a match, smelled coal oil catching, then the crackle of kindling as Elias started the stove. She stopped at the threshold. The cabin was cold. No fire had burned here in days, maybe weeks. Dust motes floated in the gray light from the windows. But it was solid. It was shelter. It was more house than Clara had ever expected to call hers. She couldn't make herself go in. Something in her chest had locked up tight. If she stepped through that door, this would become real. And real things could be taken away. Real things always got taken away. Stove will warm up in a few minutes. Elias's voice came from inside. Come in before you freeze, standing there. Clara stepped over the threshold. The main room held a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a cook stove with a flat top for frying, shelves lined with tins and jars, and a stone fireplace big enough to roast a pig. Animal pelts hung on the walls. Beaver, fox, something spotted that might have been lynx. The floor was packed dirt, swept clean. Elias moved through the space, lighting a second lamp, adjusting the stove damper. He didn't look at her, just worked. Like having a strange woman in his cabin was the most ordinary thing in the world. Come on, he said. Show you around. The tour took less than 10 minutes. Root cellar dug into the hillside behind the cabin. Shelves lined with sand-packed carrots and turnips, jars of preserved berries, a barrel of flour, a barrel of salt, smokehouse with strips of dried venison hanging from hooks, the smell of hickory so strong it made Clara's mouth water. Well, with a hand-crank windlass. The bucket coming up cold and clear when Elias demonstrated. And then, her room. Clara stood in the doorway, unable to move. It was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, with a single window facing east. A real bed frame with rope springs, a washstand with a chipped basin and a pitcher, a wooden chair, and on the bed, a quilt. She walked forward without meaning to. Her hand reached out, touched the fabric. Soft, faded, indigo and cream in a pattern she recognized double wedding ring. Her grandmother had called it, back when Clara was small enough to sit on laps. Someone had stitched this by hand. Thousands of tiny stitches. Perfect and even. Someone had made this with patience, with care. Clara pulled her hand back like she'd touched a hot stove. Sun comes up through that window. Elias stood in the doorway, his bulk filling the frame. Good light in the mornings. More words than he'd strung together since they met. Clara nodded. Her throat was too tight for speech. Elias pointed at the door. Latch on the inside. Slides into that bracket there. He didn't explain why. Didn't need to. Clara understood. Supper in an hour. He walked away. His footsteps faded toward the main room. Clara heard the stove door open and close, the clank of cast iron. She sat on the bed. The rope springs creaked under her weight. The mattress was stuffed with something soft feathers, maybe, or cattail fluff. Nothing like the corn husk pallet she'd slept on for 7 years. The tin box sat in her lap. She hadn't let go of it since they left town. Her fingers ached from gripping it. She set it on the washstand, opened it. The columbine flower, the bone button, still there, still hers. The smell of cooking meat drifted through the doorway. Clara's stomach cramped. When had she last eaten the hardtack this morning? A few bites of dried venison the night before? Before that? She couldn't remember. Her mother measured food like gold, and Clara always got the smallest portion. She stood, walked to the main room. Elias stood at the stove, stirring something in a cast iron pot. The smell hit Clara like a wave elk meat, wild onions, sage, something rich and dark that made her knees weak. "Sit," Elias said without turning around. Clara sat. He ladled stew into a tin bowl, set it in front of her. The meat was tender, falling apart. Chunks of potato. Carrots soft enough to melt on her tongue. Clara ate without speaking, without breathing. Almost. The warmth spread from her belly outward. Loosening muscles she hadn't known were clenched. Elias sat across from her, ate his own portion, ate his own. The coal oil lamp flickered between them, casting shadows that jumped and settled on the log walls. "You'll help with the cooking," he said. "The garden. Lighter chores around the place?" He paused, chewed, swallowed. "I'll teach you what you need to know. Trapping, fishing, how to read the weather." Another pause. He seemed to be searching for words, turning them over before letting them out. "You ain't a servant. You ain't—" He stopped, started again. "A partner. That's what I'm looking for. Someone who earns their keep and keeps what they earn." Clara nodded. She didn't trust her voice. They finished eating in silence. Elias took her bowl, washed both in a bucket by the stove. Clara watched his hands, those scarred, capable hands, and wondered what she was supposed to do now. What the rules were. What would happen if she broke them? "Here." Elias set something on the table in front of her. A small parcel wrapped in brown paper, tied with store twine. Clara stared at it. "Nights get cold up here, even before proper cold sets in." She unwrapped the paper. Wool socks, hand-knitted, the stitches uneven in places, made by someone who knew the craft but hadn't quite mastered it. Gray wool, thick and warm. Clara ran her thumb across the stitches, back and forth, back and forth. No one had given her anything in 7 years. Not since her father pressed a penny into her palm the day before he died and told her to buy herself a sweet "Thank you." The words came out cracked, barely audible. Elias nodded. "Get some sleep. Lots to do tomorrow." Clara took the socks to her room, closed the door, slid the latch into place, the sound of it, metal against wood, solid and sure. She changed into her night shift, pulled on the wool socks, climbed under the quilt. The mattress held her. The quilt covered her. Outside, the creek sang its endless song over the stones. She waited for the catch, the cost, the cruelty that always came. The cabin settled around her, wood creaking as it cooled, The stove ticking in the other room. An owl somewhere in the pines, calling to its mate. Nothing came. Clara closed her eyes. She slept. Deep in the night, a sound woke her. Rhythmic. Sharp. Thock. 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 Clara pushed back the quilt, crossed to the window, pressed her face to the cold glass. Moonlight flooded the clearing. And there was Elias, in just his undershirt despite the chill, swinging an axe into a log, splitting wood, stacking it. His breath fogged white in the cold air. He wasn't cutting firewood. The pieces were too small, too uniform. He was building something. Clara watched until her eyes grew heavy. She never saw him stop. The carrots came up orange and stubby, caked with black soil. Clara knelt in the garden, her fingers raw from digging. 1 week she'd been here. 7 days of learning where things were, how things worked, what Elias expected, and now this, her hands in the earth, pulling up vegetables that everyone had given up for dead. Thought those were goners. Elias stood at the garden's edge, arms crossed, watching her work. Clara held up a carrot. Dirt crumbled from its skin. The greens were yellowed and limp, but the root itself was firm, solid, good. My father had a garden. The words came out before she could stop them. Before he got sick. He taught me what to look for. Elias nodded, said nothing. But he didn't walk away either. Clara kept digging. The turnips were harder to find. They'd bolted and spread, their greens tangling with the squash vines, until the whole bed was a mess of stems and leaves. But the roots were there, hiding under the chaos. Hard as fists, some of them perfect for roasting. By midday, she had filled a basket, carrots, turnips, a handful of sage that had gone woody, but still smelled sharp when she crushed a leaf between her fingers. Her shoulders burned. Her knees ached from kneeling on the cold ground. Dirt had worked its way under her nails, into the creases of her palms, probably into her hair. She carried the basket to the porch where Elias sat mending a harness. He looked up, looked at the basket, reached in and pulled out a carrot, turned it over in his scarred hands. Good eye. 2 words. Clara felt them land somewhere deep in her chest, in a place that had been empty so long she'd forgotten it was there. She spent the afternoon cleaning the vegetables, storing them in the root cellar, learning where everything went. The rhythm of it calmed her, the repetition, the purpose, the simple satisfaction of putting things in order. By supper, her back ached and her hands were stiff, but when she looked at the full shelves in the root cellar, something shifted in her stomach. Not hunger, something else. 3 days later, Clara woke before dawn. She lay in bed, listening to the cabin, Elias moving in the main room, the stove door opening and closing, the smell of coffee drifting under her door. She pushed back the quilt and got up. Can I make bread? Elias looked up from his coffee. His eyebrows rose a fraction. Flowers in the barrel by the stove, lards in the crock, salt on the shelf. He paused. Been a while since I had fresh bread. Clara found the sourdough starter in a crockery crock on the back of a shelf, fed but neglected. She mixed the dough the way her grandmother had taught her flour. Water, a pinch of salt, a spoonful of lard. The starter bubbled when she added it. Still alive after all this time. Kneading was the part she loved. The dough warming under her palms, turning from shaggy mess to smooth ball, Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. Her mother had never complained about her bread. It was the one thing Clara could do that escaped criticism. She shaped the loaf, set it near the stove to rise, covered it with a clean cloth. 2 hours later, the smell filled the cabin. Elias came in from checking his trap lines, stopped in the doorway. His nostrils flared. Clara pulled the bread from the oven golden brown, the crust crackling as it cooled. She set it on the table, cut a thick slice, handed it to Elias with a pat of butter from the crock. He took a bite. His eyes closed. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Clara to see. He ate 3 slices before supper. Didn't say a word. But Clara saw him reach for the 4th before stopping himself. And that was enough. She wrapped the remaining loaf in cloth, already planning tomorrow's batch. Maybe she'd add some of the dried sage. Maybe some of the wild onions Elias had shown her growing near the creek. Her hands smelled of flour and yeast. She didn't wash them right away. By the end of the 2nd week, Elias took her fishing. The spot was upstream, where the creek widened into a pool. Willows hung over the water, their branches trailing yellow leaves across the surface. Elias handed her a cane pole with a horsehair line, a hook baited with something that looked like a grouse feather wrapped in thread. "Trout like the shadows," he said. "Under them willows. Where the water slows down." Clara cast. The line tangled before it hit the water. She pulled it back, untangled it. Cast again. This time the hook caught a branch. Elias said nothing. Just waited while she freed it, his own line in the water, patient as stone. 3rd cast. The fly landed on the surface and sat there, going nowhere. "Let it drift," Elias said. "Fish don't care about your schedule. They'll come when they come." Clara let it drift. Nothing happened. She reeled in. Cast again. 4th cast. 5th. 6th. Her arm was starting to ache. The willows seemed to be mocking her, their branches swaying just out of reach. 7th cast. The fly landed perfectly, drifted under the willows. And something hit. Clara's hands jerked. The pole bent. She pulled too hard and felt the line go slack. Gone. "Easy." Elias's voice was calm. "Don't yank. Let him run. He'll tire himself out." She cast again. 8th try. The fly drifted. The water swirled. This time, Clara waited. Let the fish take the hook. Let it run. The line sang through the water, cutting left, cutting right. Her arms burned. But she held on. The trout surfaced, small, maybe 8 inches, barely a meal. Clara lifted it from the water, the fish twisting silver in the afternoon light. Droplets flew. The scales were cool and slick against her palm. She laughed. The sound startled her. Startled Elias too, his eyebrow lifted, his head tilted slightly. She hadn't laughed in years, since before her father died. "Well," Elias said, "ain't gonna starve yet." They cooked the trout that night in the cast-iron skillet, the skin crisping in bacon fat. Clara ate every bite, picking the bones clean. It was the best fish she'd ever tasted. She didn't know if that was because she'd caught it herself or because something had changed in the way things tasted up here. Maybe both. The next morning, Elias led her to the corral. "Time you learned to sit a mule," he said. Moses stood waiting, ears pricked forward, Elias showed Clara how to mount foot in the stirrup, hand on the saddle horn, swing up and over. She tried twice before she managed it, her dress tangling around her legs. "Walk him around the corral," Elias said. "Get a feel for how he moves." Clara nudged Moses forward. The mule walked, slow, steady. Nothing like the horses she'd seen men ride through town. Moses didn't care about speed. He just walked. "Case you ever need to go somewhere without me," Elias said from the fence rail. Clara didn't ask why she might need that. She just kept riding. After supper, Clara went to the creek to wash her hands. The water was cold, numbing her fingers. She cupped it to her face, gasping at the shock of it. When she looked down, her reflection formed on the still surface. Same round face, same heavy body, same girl who had knelt in the dust of the market square 2 weeks ago. But the eyes looking back at her were different. She didn't look away, didn't plunge her hands into the water to shatter the image. She studied herself for 3 full breaths. The face, the body, the person inside. Then she stood, wiped her hands on her apron, walked back to the cabin. One evening, near the end of her 3rd week, Clara came back from gathering firewood to find Elias standing in the doorway of her room. He wasn't moving, just standing there, his broad shoulders filling the frame, his eyes fixed on something inside. Clara stepped closer, saw what he was looking at. The quilt, indigo and cream, double wedding ring. His face had gone somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere that hurt. Clara opened her mouth to speak. Elias turned, walked past her without a word. The door to the cabin clicked shut behind him. Clara stood in the hallway, heart pounding. There was a story in that quilt, a story he wasn't ready to tell. She could wait. The screaming woke Clara before dawn. Not human, animal, high-pitched and desperate, cutting through the gray light like a saw blade. She threw off the quilt, pulled on her boots without lacing them, ran to the main room. Elias was already at the door, rifle in hand, listening. "The sow," he said. Down by the creek. They ran. Clara's unlaced boots slapped against her ankles. The screaming grew louder, a sound she'd never heard from a pig before, raw terror mixed with pain. They crashed through the brush, branches whipping at Clara's face, until they reached the ravine. The sow was at the bottom, 20 feet down, wedged between rocks and mud, her black body thrashing in the muck. A Berkshire black with white points on her snout and feet and heavily pregnant. Her belly bulged with piglets that would come any day now. She'd slipped on the wet bank, tumbled down, gotten stuck. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank. Elias started down the slope. His good leg found purchase. His bad leg the right one. The one that hitched when he walked buckled under him. He grabbed a tree root, face going white, breath hissing through his teeth. "Can't do it." The words came out tight, angry, not at Clara, at himself. "Leg won't hold on that grade." Clara looked at the ravine. The mud, the rocks, slick with moisture. The sow, 200 pounds at least, thrashing and screaming below. Her mouth went dry. "But you can." Elias's eyes met hers. No pity, no doubt, just fact. "I'll talk you through it." Clara swallowed, grabbed the hemp rope Elias handed her, started down. The slope was steeper than it looked. Her boots slid on the wet leaves, and she grabbed at roots, at rocks, at anything solid. Mud soaked through her dress within seconds. The sow's screaming intensified as Clara got closer. The animal's eyes rolled white with terror, her head thrashing as she struggled. "Easy, girl." Clara's voice came out steadier than she expected. "Easy now. Easy." She reached the bottom, mud to her knees. The smell hit her pig musk, wet earth, something sharp that might have been the animal's fear. The sow lunged sideways, and Clara jumped back, nearly losing her footing. "Get the rope around her chest," Elias called from above. "Behind the front legs. She can't reach you there." Clara moved closer. The sow's head swung toward her, snout coated in mud. Clara spoke again, low and calm, the voice she'd used for frightened animals back home, the stray dogs, the nervous horses, the voice no one had ever used for her. I know. It's all right. I'm going to help you." The sow's thrashing slowed. Not much, but enough. Clara lunged, got the rope around the animal's chest, behind the front legs. The sow screamed and bucked. Clara fell face first into the mud, rope burning through her palms. But she didn't let go. She pulled herself up, spat mud from her mouth, tasted grit between her teeth. "Now pull," Elias shouted. "Steady, don't jerk." Then Clara pulled. The sow didn't move. She braced her boots against a rock, leaned back, pulled harder. Her arms screamed. Her shoulders felt like they were tearing from their sockets. The sow thrashed, digging herself deeper. Clara fell, landed on her back in the mud, got up, pulled again. Nothing. "Use your legs," Elias called. "Bend your knees. Push with your thighs." Clara adjusted her grip, bent her knees, pushed. The sow moved. An inch, maybe 2. Clara pulled again and again. Her arms stopped feeling like arms and became something else, just muscles and bone and will. The mud sucked at her boots. Her dress was ruined, plastered to her body. Brown and black and unrecognizable. Sweat ran down her face despite the cold, mixing with the mud. The sow rose. Inch by inch, screaming less now, exhausted, letting Clara do the work. Clara's vision blurred. Her lungs burned, but she kept pulling. The sow's front hooves found purchase on the slope, then the back hooves. Mo. Clara gave one final heave, and the animal crested the ravine edge, stood shaking on solid ground, and waddled toward the cabin without looking back. Clara collapsed. She lay in the mud at the bottom of the ravine, gasping. Her arms hung limp at her sides. Her palms were raw, rope burned, bleeding in places. Mud caked her hair, her face, her teeth, and she was laughing. The sound bubbled up from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd forgotten existed. Laughing at the absurdity of it. At the mud. At herself. At the fact that she, Clara, the fat girl, the useless one, the burden had just pulled a 200-pound pregnant pig out of a hole. Elias appeared at the top of the ravine. His face was unreadable in the gray light. "You coming up? Or you planning to live down there?" Clara laughed harder. Then she grabbed a root and started climbing. That night, the storm came. It rolled in from the west as the sun set. Clouds black and heavy, lightning flickering in their bellies. By full dark, Rain hammered the cabin roof so hard Clara could barely hear herself think. Thunder cracked. The windows flashed white. She sat by the fire in dry clothes, her only other dress, the one she'd arrived in, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled of smoke and pine. Her arms ached. Her hands throbbed where she'd wrapped them in clean cloth. But she was warm. She was dry. She was alive. Elias moved around the cabin, checking the shutters, banking the fire. He pulled a yellow tin from the back of a shelf. Arbuckle's Ariosa coffee. Clara had seen it before but never touched. She understood instinctively that it was saved for occasions. He brewed it strong and black. Handed her a cup. Clara wrapped her fingers around the tin. The warmth seeped into her rope-burned palms. She breathed in the smell, rich, dark, nothing like the weak chicory her mother used to make. Lightning flashed. The cabin shook. Elias sat across from her, his own cup cradled in his hands. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire popped and settled. Rain drummed overhead. Then Elias started talking. Not about himself, about the mountains. Seasons up here teach you things, he said, his voice low, almost lost in the storm. Things no book can tell you. How to read the weather. How to wait. How to work with what you've got instead of wishing for what you don't. Clara listened. The coffee warmed her from the inside out. Land doesn't care who your people were, Elias continued. Doesn't care what you look like or what they said about you in town. He paused, took a sip. Up here, nobody cares about nothing but what you can do. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, the fire crackled. Clara looked down at her hands, the cloth wrappings already showing spots of blood from the rope burns, the scratches, the mud still caught under her nails. These hands had pulled a 200-pound sow out of a ravine today. These hands had kneaded bread, caught fish, dug carrots from frozen ground. Somewhere far away, her mother's voice whispered, useless, worthless, a burden. Clara flexed her fingers, watched them move, strong, capable. Hers. The voice faded. She didn't chase it, didn't argue with it, just let it go, like a leaf carried downstream. The storm died at midnight. The silence that followed was so complete Clara could hear her own heartbeat. The rain stopped. The thunder rolled away into the east. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a dim orange glow across the cabin. Clara set down her empty cup. Her eyelids were heavy. Her whole body felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. Clara? She looked up. Elias was staring at the embers, his face half in shadow. My daughter. His voice was rough, barely audible. She'd have liked you. Past tense. Clara's breath caught. She waited. Elias said nothing more. Just stared at the fire until the last ember turned to ash. Morning light came gray through the windows. Clara woke to the smell of coffee already brewing. She pushed back the quilt, the indigo and cream quilt she still couldn't look at without wondering, and walked to the main room. Elias sat at the table tentamanu. His hands were wrapped around a tin cup. But he wasn't drinking. He was staring at something far away, something Clara couldn't see. She started to speak. He spoke first. Hannah. The name hung in the air. Clara lowered herself into the chair across from him. My wife? Elias's voice was rough, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. Hannah Margaret Crane. Married her in 68. Built this cabin with her. Every log, every stone in that chimney. He took a breath, let it out. Lily came 2 years later. Named her after Hannah's mother. She had her mother's eyes, brown, soft, could make you do anything with those eyes. Clara didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. Scarlet fever. The words came out flat, dead. Winter of 73, came on fast. Lily first, then Hannah. I rode for the doctor 2 days each way, and the snow came early. By the time I got back, he stopped. His jaw worked. His hands tightened around the cup until his knuckles went white. Buried them myself, behind the cabin. Ground was frozen. Took me 3 days to dig those graves. Clara's throat closed. She thought of the area behind the cabin, the patch of ground she'd avoided without knowing why, the wooden crosses she'd glimpsed through the trees but never asked about. Came up here to disappear, Elias said. Figured I'd die up here. Nobody'd miss me. Nobody'd care. He paused, finally looked at Clara. Didn't die. Kept waking up. Kept breathing. 12 years of that. Clara couldn't speak. What words were there for a grief that old? That deep? Saw you in that market square? Elias's voice changed. Softer now. Way you picked up that boy's penny. Wiped it off. Handed it back. Didn't expect nothing for it. Didn't even expect a thank you. He paused. That's how Lily was. Gave without thinking. Didn't know there was another way to be. Clara's eyes burned. You ain't Lily, Elias said. Ain't trying to make you into her. But when I saw you kneeling in that dirt, your mother walking away with the gold, I thought... He stopped. Started again. I thought maybe I could do one good thing, just one, before I'm done. The cabin was silent. The fire popped. Outside. A bird called from somewhere in the pines. Clara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Thank you. 2 words. Nowhere near enough. But Elias nodded like they were everything. That evening, Clara told her story. They sat at the same table. The coal oil lamp between them. Shadows dancing on the log walls. Elias had made supper venison and beans, and the plate sat empty now, pushed aside. The words came hard, like pulling stones from deep water, each one heavier than the last. My mother called me a burden from the day my father died. Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears. Thin, young. Said I ate too much, cost too much, took up too much space. She paused, swallowed. I started to believe her. Every word. I'd look in the mirror and see what she saw. Fat, clumsy, worthless. Elias said nothing, just listened. I stopped looking in mirrors after a while. Couldn't stand it. What looked back at me? Clara's hands twisted in her lap. I used to wish I could just disappear, get smaller and smaller until there was nothing left, until I didn't take up any space at all. The lamp flickered. Clara reached for her tin box, sitting on the table beside her plate, opened it, pulled out the bone button. This was my father's, from his Sunday shirt. He gave it to me the day before he died. Her thumb traced the worn surface. I used to hold it at night and pretend he was still there, still telling me I was his clever girl, his Clarabelle. Her voice cracked. Nobody called me that after he was gone. She couldn't continue. The words stuck in her throat like broken glass. Elias reached across the table, his hand scarred, calloused, rough as tree bark settled over hers. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Clara breathed. In, out. In, out. When she finally looked up, Elias's eyes were steady on hers. No pity. No judgment. Just presence. Just witness. He held her hand until the lamp burned low. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, the quilt pulled to her chin, staring at the ceiling. The darkness pressed down on her like a weight, like a hand on her chest. The old thoughts came crawling back. Who was she fooling? She was still the same Clara, still fat, still clumsy, still the girl who couldn't do anything right. Elias had taken her in, yes, fed her, clothed her, given her a room with a quilt, stitched by his dead wife's hands. But how long would that last? How long before she made a mistake too big to forgive? How long before he realized what her mother had known all along, that Clara was a burden, a waste of space, a mouth that ate more than it was worth? She rolled onto her side. Her stomach churned. The venison and beans sat heavy and sour. Her mother's voice, clear in the darkness. Nobody will ever want you. Nobody will ever keep you. You're too fat, too ugly, too stupid. Who do you think you are? Playing house with a mountain man? He'll get tired of you. They always get tired of you. Clara's eyes burned. Her throat closed. You should leave. Leave before he throws you out. Leave before you have to see the look on his face when he realizes what a mistake he's made. She sat up. The quilt fell away. Her hands were shaking. The cabin was silent. Elias slept in the main room, on a pallet by the fire. She could slip out. Right now. Take nothing. Walk until the mountains swallowed her. Disappear the way she'd always wanted to. At least then she'd be choosing it. At least then she wouldn't have to see the disgust in his eyes when he finally saw her the way her mother had. Clara stood. Her legs trembled. The cold floorboards creaked under her feet. She took a step toward the door. Another. Her hand reached for the latch and stopped. The sow. The ravine. The rope burning through her palms. 200 pounds of panicked animal. And she'd pulled it out. She'd done that. Not Elias. Her. His voice. Clear in the darkness. But you can. Clara's hand fell away from the latch. She stood there for a long time, shaking, breathing. Her mother's voice screaming in one ear, Elias's voice quiet in the other. But you can. She walked back to the bed, lay down, pulled the quilt up to her chin. The darkness was still there. The old voices were still there. But so was something else now. Something small. Something stubborn. She would stay. Not because she believed she deserved to, not because the voices had stopped, but because she was tired of running, tired of making herself smaller, tired of disappearing before anyone could make her. She would stay. That was enough. Clara stared at the ceiling until the gray light of dawn crept through the window. She didn't sleep, but she didn't leave. The sound of hoofbeats brought her upright. Fast. Coming up the trail, Clara threw off the quilt, crossed to the window, pressed her face to the cold glass. A rider, single horse, moving at a gallop through the morning mist. The main room door crashed open. Elias stood there, rifle in hand, his face hard as granite. "Stay inside." The rider was young, 20, maybe, sitting awkward on a bay mare that looked too big for him. Clara watched from the window as Elias lowered his rifle. Not a threat. Then, just a messenger. The young man slid off his horse, nearly stumbling on the dismount, and stood in the clearing with his hat in his hands. "Mr. Elias," his voice cracked. "I'm Jacob. From town. The farrier's son." Clara remembered him. He'd been in the market square that day, standing with his mouth open while her mother walked away with the gold. Elias said nothing, just waited. Jacob shifted his weight from foot to foot. His eyes kept darting toward the cabin, toward the window where Clara stood. "I got news about the woman, the girl's mother." Clara's stomach dropped. "She's dying." Jacob's voice steadied, taking on the tone of someone reciting a message they'd memorized. "Tumor in her belly. Doc says weeks, maybe less. She's asking for her daughter." The words hit Clara like cold water. Dying. Asking for her. She walked to the door, opened it, stepped onto the porch. Jacob's eyes went wide. Clara knew what he saw. The same fat girl who'd knelt in the dust 5 months ago. Same round face, same heavy body. But something else too, something that made him take a half step back without meaning to. He swallowed. "You look different." "I'm the same." "No." Jacob shook his head. "No, you ain't. Whole town's been talking these past months. The Mountainman who paid off the—" He stopped. His face reddened. "They want to know if you're all right." Clara looked at him. Really looked. He was just a boy. Nervous. Curious. Probably sent because no one else wanted to make the ride. "I'm fine," she said. "Better than fine." Jacob nodded, kept nodding, like he didn't know how to stop. "So, your mother, she wants to see you before she—" He trailed off. Clara said nothing. Elias came to stand beside her on the porch. His presence was solid, warm. He didn't speak, didn't need to. This wasn't his decision to make. "I'll think about it," Clara said. Jacob mounted his mare, looked back once, twice, 3 times, as he rode down the trail. Clara watched until he disappeared into the trees. Then she walked to the creek. Her thinking place. The rock where she'd caught her first fish. Where she'd seen her reflection and not looked away. The water ran clear and cold over the stones, catching the afternoon light. Clara sat. Her mother was dying. The woman who had beaten her, starved her, called her worthless 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. The woman who had taken the gold and walked away without looking back. That woman was lying in a bed somewhere, asking for Clara. What did she owe her? Clara picked up a stone. Smooth, gray, cold in her palm. She turned it over, feeling its weight. Nothing. She owed her mother nothing. The beatings, the hunger, the years of being made to feel like a mistake, like something that should have been erased. All of that added up to a debt that ran the other way. Her mother owed her, not the reverse. She could stay here, on this mountain, in this cabin. Let her mother die alone, the way Clara had felt alone every day of her childhood. It would be justice. It would be fair. Clara threw the stone into the creek. It disappeared with a plop. But that wasn't why she was sitting here. That wasn't the question. The question was, who did she want to be? She could be the girl who hid, who let the past fester like a wound that never healed, who spent the rest of her life avoiding the thing that had broken her. Or she could be someone else. Clara watched the water run. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows lengthened. She didn't want forgiveness. That was too clean. Too easy. Too much like something from a preacher's sermon. Her mother didn't deserve forgiveness, and Clara wasn't sure she had it to give. But she wanted closure. She wanted to stand in front of that woman one last time, not as the girl who had been beaten, not as the girl who had been sold, as the woman who had survived, who had pulled a 200-pound sow out of a ravine, who had caught fish and baked bread and learned to ride a mule and slept under a quilt stitched with love by a woman she'd never met. She wanted her mother to see that. Not for revenge, not for satisfaction, for herself. So she could close that door and walk away, knowing it was closed. Clara stood. Her legs were stiff from sitting. The sun was low now, painting the mountains gold and orange. She walked back to the cabin. Elias was on the porch, sitting in the rocking chair he'd built the project she'd watched him work on in the moonlight all those weeks ago. He didn't look up when she approached, just kept rocking, waiting. "I'm going." He nodded, still didn't look up. "Not for her. For me. I need to—" Clara stopped, searched for the words. "I need to finish it. Whatever this is. I need to finish it." Elias rocked. The chair creaked. Then he stood. "Moses knows the way. You've been riding him enough these weeks. He'll get you there safe." He walked into the cabin. Clara heard him moving around inside, opening drawers, shifting things. When he came back out, he held two things. The first was a small pouch. He pressed it into her palm. Coins clinked inside. "For whatever you need down there. Doctor, food, boarding house." Clara opened her mouth to protest. Elias shook his head. "Take it." She took it. The second thing was smaller. A bird, carved from pine, small enough to fit in her palm. Its wings were spread like it was about to take flight. Every feather etched with care. The wood was smooth, polished with wax, until it gleamed. "Made it last month," Elias said. "Wasn't sure what for. Now I know." He held it out. Clara took it. The wood was warm from his hands. She turned it over, feeling the grooves, the curves, the hours of work that had gone into something so small. "So you remember where home is?" Clara's throat tightened. She tucked the bird into her pocket, next to the tin box with the columbine flower and the bone button. Her treasures. All of them together now. I'll be back. I know. 2 words. No doubt in them. No fear. Just certainty. Clara walked to the corral. Moses stood waiting, ears pricked forward. She saddled him the way Elias had taught her, cinched tight, but not too tight. Stirrups adjusted to her height. Weeks of practice had made the motions familiar. She mounted without help, settled into the saddle. Elias stood on the porch. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just stood there, solid as the mountains behind him. Clara turned Moses toward the trail. She didn't look back. Looking back was for people who weren't sure. She was sure. The trail down was the same trail she'd stumbled up 5 months ago. Same trees, same rocks, same switchbacks that made her legs burn and her lungs ache. But she wasn't stumbling now. She sat straight in the saddle, chin level, shoulders square. Moses picked his way down the mountain with the patience of an animal who had made this trip 100 times. Clara rode through the afternoon, through the evening. She made camp at the same creek where she'd drunk from Elias's canteen that first day, where he'd told her his name and promised no one would raise a hand to her. She slept under the stars. The carved bird pressed against her chest. Morning came gray and cold. She mounted Moses and rode on. The town appeared at sunset. Clara stopped at the crest of the last hill. Below her, the main street stretched out the general store, the livery, the church with its whitewashed steeple. Smoke rose from chimneys. People moved between buildings, small as ants from this distance. She had left here on foot, clutching a tin box, following a stranger into the unknown. She was returning on a mule, her back straight, her eyes clear. Clara nudged Moses forward. The welcome sign passed on her left. The first houses rose on either side. And then the stairs began. Mrs. Harmon, sweeping her porch. Old Mr. Peterson, loading feed onto a wagon. A group of women outside the dry goods store, their conversation dying mid-sentence. They all turned. They all looked. Clara rode through the center of town. She didn't hurry, didn't slow down, just rode. The whispers started before she reached the church. That's her. The fat girl. The one the Mountainman paid for. Look at her. Something's different. What's she doing back? Clara kept her eyes forward. The whispers washed over her like wind, like rain, like something that couldn't touch her anymore. She rode past the market square, past the spot where she'd knelt in the dust, past the barrel where Elias had set down his gold. Her mother's house appeared at the end of the street. Clara dismounted, tied Moses to the fence post, stood there for a moment, looking at the door she'd walked through 10,000 times. Then she went in. The house smelled of sickness. Clara stood in the doorway, breathing through her mouth, laudanum and sweat, and something underneath something sweet and rotting that she recognized from her father's final days. The smell of a body giving up. The front room was smaller than she remembered. The table where her mother had counted coins looked child-sized now. The chair where Clara had sat, eating watered-down soup while her mother complained about the cost of feeding her, it was just a chair. Wood and nails. Nothing more. She walked to the bedroom. Her mother lay in the bed, shrunken and gray. The flesh had fallen away from her face. leaving the bones visible beneath paper-thin skin. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing came in shallow rasps. Clara stood at the foot of the bed, looking down at the woman who had made her feel worthless for 19 years. The eyes opened. For a moment, confusion. Then recognition. Then something else. Something that twisted the thin lips into a familiar shape. So... Her mother's voice was a whisper, cracked and dry. The fat girl came crawling back. Clara said nothing. Thought you were too good for us now. Living up there with that Mountainman. The words came slow, each one costing effort. What's the matter? He finally see what you really are. Finally throw you out like the garbage you know. One word. Quiet. Final. Her mother stopped. Her mouth hung open. The next insult dying on her lips. Clara stepped closer. Not angry. Not afraid. Just present. I didn't come to hear that. I came to tell you something. Her mother's eyes narrowed. The old cruelty flickered there, trying to gather strength. I'm not nothing. Clara's voice was steady. I never was. You were wrong. About all of it. Silence. Her mother stared at her. The cruelty in her eyes wavered. Something else moved underneath something Clara had never seen before. Confusion. Maybe fear. I used to believe everything you told me, Clara continued. Every word. I thought I was worthless because you said I was. I thought I was a burden because you made me feel like one. She paused. Let the words settle. But you were wrong. And I'm done believing you. Her mother's mouth worked. No sound came out. Clara looked at her, really looked. At the sunken cheeks, the yellowed skin, the hands that had struck her so many times, now lying limp and useless on the blanket. She waited for the anger to come, the hatred, the satisfaction of seeing her tormentor reduced to this. None of it came. There was only emptiness. And underneath the emptiness, something that might have been pity. Not forgiveness that was too clean, too easy, but pity. For a woman who had spent her whole life making others smaller so she could feel big. I hope you find some peace, Clara said. I already have. She turned, walked to the door, paused at the threshold. Her mother made a sound, not a word. Just a sound wet and broken. Clara didn't look back. She walked out of the house and into the evening air. Clara stayed in town for 2 days. She paid the doctor with coins from the pouch Elias had given her. Bought medicine. Clean bandages. Arranged for a neighbor woman named Mrs. Crawford to check on her mother twice a day. The woman took the money with a nervous glance at Clara, like she expected to be bitten. It wasn't forgiveness. It was duty. The kind you fulfill and walk away from. On the second morning, Clara walked through the market square. The same square where she'd knelt in the dust. The same barrel where Elias had set down his gold. The same faces watching. Always watching. Mrs. Harmon from the general store saw her coming. The woman's hands twisted in her apron. Her eyes darted left, right, anywhere but at Clara. Clara? Her voice came out strangled. You look... well... Thank you, Mrs. Harmon. Clara walked past her, into the store. The bell above the door jingled the same bell that had jingled every time Clara had hauled flour sacks through that door, sweating and aching, While Mrs. Harmon pretended not to see, she bought seed packets, tomatoes, beans, squash, summer vegetables for a garden that would need tending in a few months. The seeds were wrapped in brown paper, the names printed in faded ink. "That'll be 40 cents, Mrs. Harmon said. Clara counted out the coins, set them on the counter. Mrs. Harmon's hand hovered over the money. She didn't pick it up. "I'm sorry, Tom," she said. So quiet Clara almost missed it. "About before. About everything." Clara looked at her. At the shame in her eyes. At the way she couldn't quite meet Clara's gaze. "I know," Clara said. She took her seeds and walked out. The stairs followed her through town. She felt them on her back, on her shoulders, on the curve of her hips that had always drawn whispers, but they felt different now. Lighter, like sunlight instead of judgment. She wasn't smaller, wasn't thinner, wasn't any of the things the town had wanted her to be. But she was Clara. And that name meant something now. Third morning, dawn breaking gray and gold over the mountains. Clara mounted Moses at the edge of town. The streets were empty except for a dog nosing through garbage, and a rooster crowing somewhere behind the livery. She didn't look back at her mother's house. The trail climbed through the pines. Clara let Moses set the pace, his hooves finding the familiar path. The air thinned and sweetened. Birds called from the branches. The first wildflowers of early spring columbines, purple and white, dotted the meadows. Her mother was still breathing when Clara left. She might last a few more weeks. She might not. Clara had done what she could, paid for care, said what she needed to say, closed the door. The rest was not her burden. The sun climbed. The trail steepened. Moses's breath came harder, fogging in the cool air. Clara's legs ached from the saddle, her back stiff from 2 nights in a boarding house bed that was nothing like the feather mattress waiting for her. Waiting for her. The thought caught in her chest. A bed. A room. A place that was hers. A home. The cabin appeared through the trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. The garden. Her garden showed rows of turned earth where Elias had been preparing for spring planting. The creek sang over its stones. In the pen behind the smokehouse, the sow nursed 8 pink piglets, their tiny bodies squirming against her side. And on the porch, in the rocking chair he'd built with his own hands, Elias sat watching the trail. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just sat there, solid as the mountains behind him, waiting. Clara rode into the clearing, dismounted, tied Moses to the corral post. Her legs wobbled as she walked toward the cabin. 3 days of riding had taken their toll. She climbed the porch steps, stood in front of Elias. "I'm back?" He nodded, rose from the chair. His bad leg was stiff. She could see it in the way he moved, but his eyes were warm. "Soup's on. Figured you'd be hungry." They walked inside together. That evening, Clara sat on the porch. The stars came out one by one, then dozens, then thousands more stars than she'd ever seen from town, where the lanterns and cook fires dimmed the sky. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. Elias brought out 2 cups of coffee. Arbuckles. The good stuff. He handed her one and lowered himself into the rocking chair beside her. They sat in silence. The comfortable kind. The kind that doesn't need filling. Clara reached into her pocket, pulled out the carved bird. Its wings were spread, ready for flight. She set it on the porch rail, facing east, toward the sunrise that would come in a few hours. The quilt was around her shoulders. The indigo and cream quilt, stitched by hands she'd never known, worn soft by years of use. She pulled it tighter. She was not thin. She was not what anyone in that town had wanted her to be. She was Clara, round and strong and scarred in places no one could see. But she was here. On this mountain. In this cabin. With this man who had seen something in her when no one else had bothered to look. She had chosen this. Every step up that trail, every morning she'd woken and not walked away, every moment she'd stayed when the old voices told her to run. No one could take that from her. The coffee warmed her hands. The night air cooled her face. Somewhere in the corral, Moses snorted and stamped. Spring was coming. The seeds were ready. So was she. Some stories leave a quiet weight in the chest. Not the kind that needs lifting, just the kind that reminds you something real passed through. Maybe you recognized a piece of yourself in Clara. The years of carrying words that weren't yours to carry. The slow work of learning that silence can be a kindness, and so can walking away. Many of us have stood in doorways we thought we'd never leave. Some of us have returned to places that hurt us, not for forgiveness, but for something harder to name. Perhaps you know what it is to be seen by someone when you had stopped expecting it. There is no neat bow to tie around a story like this. Clara's mother is still dying in that small house. The old voices still whisper on dark nights. The quilt still holds threads from hands that will never stitch again. And that's all right. Some things are allowed to rest unfinished. Some doors close softly, without ceremony. We don't always need to understand. Sometimes, staying is enough. Sometimes, leaving is enough. Sometimes, the mountain doesn't ask us to be anything other than what we already are. Thank you for sitting with this story. Thank you for staying until the end.